for yoga. I'm delighted to welcome Johnny Beirne to the You and Your Business studio. Hey, Johnny.
Hi, Alec. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, fantastic. There's a lot here to cover, and I think there's a lot for our audience to gain from it. But
I
as
hope so.
I mentioned to you, I'm just going to take you back a small bit of history, back to your last year in school. Were you the sort of traveling person, the person who was interested in education, or were you just going to doss around? What had you got in mind for yourself?
Yeah, I'd have to say it's education, Alec.
Good for you.
Great group of friends who had plans for college, and so that's what I was going to do with them.
Okay, Grant. Had you any particular topic in mind, or were you just going to go to college?
It was a strange one, actually. It was just, go to college. Our nearest college is IT Sligo, great college. So essentially that I applied for college as opposed to apply for a particular course, if you like, and ended up getting accepted for an engineering course, an engineering certificate. So I took that, and went to IT Sligo with a bunch of great friends from school, yeah.
And how did engineering suit you, or what was it going to give you for your future life?
I suppose at the time it really was about getting into college, and the format back then was certificate, diploma, degree. So even after 2 years, you would have had opportunities to go perhaps to different disciplines based on having a certificate. So if it didn't work out, at least, I had only 2 years, whereas the format now is you pick your degree, you do your 4 years typically, and that's it. If you know what I mean, after 2 years, of course, you can leave at any time, but you kind of have to start again. So, but as I say, the priority was to get to college.
All right. Okay. So you're in college, you're doing engineering, but you found a passion for something while you were there.
Yeah. So after the certificate, then got into a diploma. One of the diplomas you can do after the mechanical engineering certificate was industrial automation. And as we were sharing earlier, automation is a big part of what I do today. So it's interesting when I look back and see how I didn't know it at the time, how it was actually planting a seed for an innovative way to operate a business is to automate what you can. So the automation was great. It was a combination of mechanical engineering and electrical engineering and some computer programming. So that was great. And then looking forward after that, then as I was doing that, I was looking at options, and a great degree that's still in IT Sligo is a degree in quality management, or quality assurance as it was called at the time.
Yes.
And every graduate was getting, they could literally choose the job or the company they wanted to work with. So that was my view: get the diploma and apply for the degree. And I got the degree and applied for one job in Ericsson in Athlone. And we finished on the 1st of June, and I was in Ericsson by the 1st of July. And that was just amazing. A really great company, international travel, was in the process department, which was had a quality role, if you like, a quality management role. As I say, we got to travel to different parts of the world, massive business in over 100 countries, 100,000 employees plus. Mobiles were taking off at the time, and Ericsson was a telco
really
and mobile. Yeah.
But you had a bit of I won't say a baptism of fire, but you had a fantastic experience with Irish Rail, just as in a work placement.
Yeah. So as part of the degree, then you get to do a 6-month work placement, and mine was in Irish Rail. I had an interest in service quality. A lot of people were looking at, if you like, manufacturing and process quality.
Sure.
But I took an interest in service and went to Irish Rail in Dublin and spent 6 months there in Connolly Station. And we looked at service quality, and I was involved in a fairly extensive public survey of people's perception of the quality of service of the different lines from Dublin to Dunleary, from Dublin to Cork, from Dublin to Sligo, all the different lines. So I was on every train line and train journey possible in the Republic, which was really good. Yeah. So some
It
interesting
must,
results came out of it. Yeah.
yeah, it must have really opened your eyes because you're dealing with one of the state bodies who would be very sort of tight and controlled on budget as well, plus a lot of paperwork because this was all before the sort of internet as we know it today.
Absolutely, yeah. So they would be. I mean, even with the greatest of intentions and initiatives, their hands would be tied from a financial and budget point of view. So, but yet, that department, in fairness, did all they could at the time to improve the overall experience for people traveling on the rail line. Yeah.
And you also had sort of an insight then to perception, which I think would sort of carry you forward as well.
Sure, yeah, and yeah. So we did a survey, and one of the things that came out was that one of the lines, the Dublin Sligo line, the perception that was that it was less punctual than other lines. But when we looked at the data, it wasn't. But the challenge with the Sligo line, because lots of parts of the line are a single line, so
Right.
to actually get a locomotive down the line and put it onto the front and let the other one, so in essence, the delay on the Sligo line, if it happened, was quite long, and
Right.
that left a perception with people that it's a poor service.
Hmm.
So in reality, when things went wrong on the Sligo line, they went very wrong. And in other words, the delay was quite long. Whereas if you're a few minutes late going from Dublin to Dunleary or Dublin to Cork, while it's not on time, the perception is, okay, it's a few minutes late, but it's not as bad, if you like, as if you get caught. So the perception of the Sligo line was it was less punctual, but in reality, it wasn't. It was just when things went wrong, they went very wrong. So it's just really important in business to have data for sure, but also to look at perception and see, have people, the way we say that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So it's important to have a sense of that in your business, I believe, for sure. And it stands to me today. It was a real eye opener to see that while the number said X, the perception,
Right.
which is reality for the customer, was different.
And I think it was also interesting from the company's perspective to have somebody actually experience what others were experiencing, which seems to be lacking in so many companies today.
Yeah, absolutely. And to actually do qualitative surveys as opposed to just quantitative, yeah, for sure. And to sit down and, I mean, if you're going to be on the Dublin to Cork line for 3 hours, it was a great opportunity just to talk to passengers over and above even the survey,
Yes.
and have
Fantastic.
some real
Networking.
conversations. Yeah, yeah.
Networking. And so obviously then, as you just mentioned, you'd moved on to Ericsson. I mean, talk about a transition and a huge culture shock. That must have been quite an
Yeah,
interesting one for you.
yeah, kind of from almost public and government to international private, but a fantastic company. A colleague of mine who's become a good friend was interviewing me, and we were talking about it afterwards. And when I walked into Ericsson that morning for the interview and looked around, I said, I want to work here. And he said the very same thing. Like a fantastic company, had a number of challenges over the years,
Yes.
but still, I think 70-80% of the telco exchange hardware is Ericsson. So they may not be known as a consumer brand. I know they merged with Sony to bring out a mobile, and they had the Sony Ericsson, and that didn't materialize. I mean, even Nokia are a company of the past, another
Yes.
Scandinavian company like Ericsson. So Apple and Samsung are now the main players. But yeah, fantastic company. And it was there that I got a real sense of the power of the internet. This is 1996. And while we would have seen the internet, so to speak, in all its glory back then, I was actually starting to see how companies use it. And one of the guys in the office was actually, able to write HTML and make web pages. And I was just fascinated, and I thought he was just a genius. And in fairness, he was a pretty intelligent guy for sure. But he said to me, "It's easy." He said, "Look, this is how you do it." And I remember putting "Hello World" up on the internet on some free hosting, and I thought this is just phenomenal. So
Fantastic, I'd say. So.
absolutely.
That's
So yeah.
if
So I
you're
ended. Sorry.
sorry, Johnny. No, just saying, if you're joining us now, you're listening to me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Johnny Beirne, and we're just talking about the sort of the start of the internet and the excitement you now had of suddenly discovering a whole new world for yourself.
Absolutely, because back then, some of your listeners and yourself may remember, it was primarily consumption is all we could do. There was the odd form or bulletin board where you could actually type into a form and hit publish, and it may or may not go up on the internet. But in general, that was the only production you could do, so to speak. It was all consumption and clicking on links and surfing around on pretty poor looking websites. But yeah, I started to put the quality system online to reduce the amount of paper and binders and stuff that was around the place. And yeah, started to build a few very amateur looking websites, but was really fascinated and kind of been involved in internet related businesses ever since. I launched an online music business called Download Music downloadmusic.ie, which became Ireland's largest independent online music service.
Wow.
We expanded into the UK. We did a deal with Ericsson. We did a deal with, not Ericsson, but sorry, Sony. We did a deal with RTE. We had a TV show that used our software. I had a music festival. So, but yeah, you could buy a song with a text message back in 2006.
Wow.
We launched it. Yeah. So, yeah, I've been involved in internet related businesses and roles ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing where you sort of from the start to where you are now, but that sort of stepping stone, just to be at the right place at the right time, but also to have the interest in that sort of technology where people might throw their eyes to heaven. But you had a grow for it, and that's obviously stood you well for your future.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I was lucky to be able to identify trends, the trend of where the internet was going, the trend of where music was going. I set up a public speaking company, as you know, called Speakific, about 4 years ago now, and sold it to a Belgian company because it was very hard to find specific speakers for specific events. That's why I called it Speakific. And that was another. I guess I just thankfully have a little bit of a way of identifying, I suppose, a need where the internet can serve that need. Yeah.
I suppose then, obviously from Ericsson's, you moved on. What had you got in mind there? Something came your way and you kind of went for it.
Yeah, so a local IT company offered me a job to head up their internet wing. So they had 2 web designers, but they really wanted to expand. And this was 1999 when, pre-dot-com bubble burst. It was .com euphoria. Yeah, so he invited me to head up the internet division, and I wanted to move back home because my dad got quite ill at the time as well, and passed that year in 2000. So yeah, I joined that company, and it was great. We were helping all their clients to have a better web presence, or even have a web presence because they had none, and for those who had, to make it even better. So did that for a year. But the plan was always to go out on my own, which I did for a number of years, doing management consultancy with a technology and indeed internet-based advisory role for small businesses. Yeah, so did that for a number of years. Yeah.
And so if you look at all the component parts that are starting to come together, you're interested in quality management, you're interested in technology, you've worked for a state body, and now then you moved on to a huge international company to come back to a local company. So you're seeing business at so many different levels. That experience must have been fantastic.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, and it's while there's some commonalities and common denominators in business. It's amazing to see the difference between the priorities of a small, 20, 30 company, employees type company up to 100,000, and then private to public and state.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It really is. You learn so much, and it is, a lot of it is, priorities and the way things are managed, and operations and politics, and all of that. It's really, really amazing. Yeah.
You were then to move on to the local enterprise offices, but I don't think they were quite called that at the time because you had instant training.
Yeah, the county enterprise boards, as they were called then, which they're now LEOs, or local enterprise offices. So a role came up for an innovation officer. So Leitrim being on the border, there's a lot of cross-border projects still in existence. So there was one all on the area of innovation. So a job came up and I applied, and just wanted to see, first of all, it was a role I was interested in innovation and automation and all that good stuff for business. So I applied and got it, and took a break from being self-employed. It was a 3-year contract, so I knew after 3 years I would be able, if I wanted to, probably had to when the contract was up, to go back working for myself as well. So it was great. And it was at the start of social media taking off as well. So my role there was to help small and medium-sized businesses and enterprises be more innovative. And one way they could do that was to, in my view, a quick way to do it was look at exploiting the internet and automating some operations. Because, if you have a few people trying to do everything, the more you can automate and the smarter you can work, essentially, the better. And then from a marketing perspective, what better way to market cost effectively is to use social media, which was only really taking off at the time. Yeah. So that was my role for 3 years, and it was great. It helped over 100 small businesses in the region to improve their online presence, email marketing, social media, video marketing, online training, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Fantastic. And if you're joining me now, you're listening to Alec Drew on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Johnny Beirne. This is kind of taking you then to where you ultimately found your home. I mean, we were talking about training, and I'm fascinated by automations. And I think a lot of our listeners, while they'd have some scant knowledge of automations, let's talk about this in more detail. And what you identified, you like training, but you saw new opportunities arising.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I learned lots about social media and seen a demand for it, and I knew my contract was coming to an end, I decided to, go out to the world as a trainer in social media. And as I said, there was a lot of demand for it. So things were really, really busy. But after a couple of years, I, realized that I couldn't automate this. It was time for money. There was no real way to scale unless you hired more trainers. And I was lucky enough to be at a conference in London that I was encouraged to attend by a close friend and coach of mine and mentor. And all the speakers, Alec, had digital products, information products, online courses. That's what the whole weekend was about. And to see how they could actually, again, automate and remove themselves from the picture, so to speak, where the student was learning, but they were potentially on the beach or what have you. Essentially, they had an online course or a program. So I came back and I said, passive income, exactly, yeah. So I came back all excited, and after about maybe 2 years launched because there was a lot of learning, and I learned it because I knew someday I wanted to teach it as a trainer, and as they say, one way to learn something is to teach it. So and I was beginning to lose my love for social media. I still think it's a powerful way to market, and I still use it to market with my clients and myself. But I learned so much about online course creation. I thought I just loved it, that I said, this is what I'm going to pivot into and reposition myself as an online course coach. And yeah, I launched my first online course 9 years ago, back in 2013.
Wow. Yeah.
It was still in social media, but it was online. But I learned so
Yeah.
much about creating that online course and launching it and marketing. As I say, I repositioned, and I've been doing it ever since. And I'm fully immersed on a daily basis with creating courses and helping people create courses so that they can have more impact, more
Right.
income, more freedom, essentially, and have a passive income, as you rightly say, because time is the most precious asset we have, and our freedom was definitely
Sure.
impacted with COVID. And when you can deliver training that has a positive impact on someone's life, and you don't always have to be physically present to do so, it's a beautiful business.
Yeah, and I mean the wonderful internet and what we can do today, which has kind of jumped on exponentially. I suppose there would be quite a number of our listeners out there who would really have an interest in this topic. But once you mention IT to them or technology, they're running miles. How would you suggest people maybe start just getting a feel for it? Apart from calling you, of course, Johnny, which you will give us your details in a minute.
Yeah. I mean, if you're passionate about teaching a particular topic and you are attracted to the idea of not exchanging time for money, then
Yeah.
there's lots and lots of resources out there. As you mentioned, I am just one of many, to help you get started. There's never been as much choice in terms of equipment and software. Yes, it can be a bit overwhelming because there's so much choice. But to get started, I think it's important just to identify a topic that you're passionate about,
Sure.
a topic you know well, that you're well known for. And if you're not, but you're passionate about it, then go and learn it. That's what I did. I was known for social media, but I had lost my passion for it. I wanted to become known as an online course coach, and that's what I spent years learning and mastering. So if you're passionate about a topic and the idea of freedom interests you, which I'm sure it does for a lot of people, and the fact that you can have more income without exchanging time for money, and then the place to get started is map out a simple course. Take some courses, even online on Udemy, or take some online courses. You get courses on Udemy for 10, 15, 20 euro. You can spend more if you wish, of course, on different types of programs. And have a look at what's involved. But essentially, it's a case of getting comfortable with your own voice and how you look on camera. And your first course doesn't necessarily need for you to be on camera, but it is expected. So my advice is to practice, hairbrush in the mirror type things years ago when we'd be pretending we were a rock star. So practice on the phone, get comfortable. It's not about how you look or how you sound, although we do need to look professional, but it's not about the cosmetics. It's about looking and sounding clear, and then sharing simple instructions for people so that they get a real transformation in the topic that you are an expert in. So just to map out, ideally you'd start with the end in mind. In other words, what will exist for people when they go through my course? What will they be able to know? What will they be able to do? What will the transformation be? And then work back in simple steps. What advice could you give them in the form of short videos that when they watch them, they'll take that journey, they'll follow that path of instruction, and they'll get the real transformation that they want. And, reach out to me, reach out to other people you may know who are experts in this area, who've walked the walk and talked the talk and have created online courses. But trust me, it's a transformative, beautiful business, because you can, I know the term money while you sleep and work on the beach and all that. So the people who sell the dream have kind of done online courses a bit of a disservice. But in reality, there are 50, 60 million students on the likes of Udemy, which is a marketplace for courses. E-learning is hugely popular because of its affordability and its accessibility. And with COVID as well, thankfully, hopefully it's becoming a thing of the past. But the reality is that, the the academic system is, in some cases, a little bit flawed, because you can learn things quicker than in 4 years and not run up a bill. But so yeah, I would say pick your passion, pick your topic. Ideally, there's an audience for it. Ideally,
Sure.
it solves a real problem for people, whether that be how to use a green screen, how to do public speaking, how to start a podcast, whatever you're passionate about, and be patient with yourself, and
Sure.
assign it a bit of time every week. Don't add it on to a fairly packed schedule. I would strongly urge people to have a real good look at their working week, so to speak, and see
Yeah.
where they can stop doing a few things, or see where they can subcontract, if possible, a few things, or see are things that they're doing taking longer because they like doing them than they actually should. And
Right.
ideally free up about 3 hours a week. And every week
Fantastic.
show up for yourself for those 3 hours and start to make your course.
I think